how do you think advertising in and off hyper and hybrid casual game differs than other mobile gaming genres and other mobile games basically? Do we have a volunteer, a sacrificial lamb? Who wants to start?
I mean, I would just say that's really down to the nature of the games. I'm
Mhm.
probably going to talk about this a little bit later in one of the topics that we covered, but because hyper casual is a lot more kind of short lived, there's more opportunities for cross promotions, try and get your players into similar games that you're also advertising. And also, I think with the shift to hybrid, there is more opportunity to expand on the in app advertising, whereas you can really impact your revenue with over in-app advertising on hyper casual. So there is a little bit more of a transition and opportunity with hybrid.
Yeah, that's what we see as well on our side. Like Abital mentioned, this show life is shorter and retention rate can drop drastically from day two. So on the monetization side, you want to monetize your users as much as possible in day one. Well, from day one and between day two. So you see a lot of like different formats. We're going to talk more about it in the hour, and but there are still like clever ways to do like strategic stack here. You don't always need to make like annoy your players, and there's definitely different ways. Suppose Christian can back me up in this, but that's basically what we see on our side.
Yeah, so we're seeing something similar. Hyper casual is almost like a breeding ground for new ad formats, right? Because you've got a lot of games where, based on an intrusive standpoint, it's 30% of overall session time is spent viewing ads, up to 60%. So I think users can definitely be trained on a more acceptable, because these are very short experiences, and they are trained to know that there's that kind of value of exchange. So yeah, we're seeing very, very similar results to AdMix.
Fantastic. And is that very similar with hybrid, as we were talking about some sort of a middle ground between the hyper casual? So I would assume a slightly longer session length, a slightly longer user experience, but still some similar trend, meaning the breadth of content is somewhat limited.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we've integrated into quite a wide plethora, from hybrid, hyper casual to your mid-core and your hardcore games, and it's actually not as complicated as you think, because for us, if you've got 5 minutes, 4 to 5 minutes of gameplay, 2 ads varying from 30 to 15 seconds is the max that you would start with. And depending on the game, you might be able to extend that, or it might be decrease. It's all about the frequency. But then with hybrid games, where there's a bit more content and there is more reason for the user to play a little bit longer, then that will open up another opportunity. So it's kind of a simple equation in terms of the amount of time and content that will keep a user engaged, and the amount of ads that we can show per minute, for instance.
Brilliant. And Abital, maybe from an advertising point of view of getting users, how does those two models kind of differ than more, let's say, the more mid-core or even casual, and the more proper casual, what you would call like casual mid? How does those two platforms change in terms of acquiring users or user acquisition?
Well, I would say if we just kind of talk about the overall differentiators, I mean, what makes hyper casual games more unique as a mobile genre is, of course, just how simple they are, and being known for their short, fun mobile gaming experience. So that generally means the LTV, the lifetime value of your users, is much, much shorter, and therefore marketers can leverage a much shorter conversion window in order to maximize their bidding strategies. A plus of that means that they're less impacted by scan data, because they can leverage day 0, day 1 ROAS. Typically as well, hyper casual publishers would strive for much lower CPIs and a much higher first day retention. So if those numbers are satisfying, the game is probably on a good trajectory for becoming profitable. And while revenue and CPIs, for example, are standard metrics which all advertisers leverage, understanding the average revenue per user is actually really crucial for hyper casual and hybrid. That's also why some publishers would go so far as to call a hyper casual a totally separate business model as well as a game genre. And when you're looking at casual versus hyper casual differentiators, it's just a little bit what Christopher mentioned before. It's that in-app advertising. So getting that right balance of how many ads you can show per minute. So they say typically, I think this was research from Adjust, like 4 ads a minute can actually impact your ads revenue on hyper casual. So 2 to 3 would be what would be recommended. And again, that cross-app promotion is a lot more relevant because your game is so short-lived. Hyper-casual publishers are likely to have a sequence of gaming apps that they want to take their user and pull them into other games as well. So being able to quickly predict the value of that user is also going to be crucial in your overall strategy to entice them into other games that you're offering as well. Hybrid, again, with this, it is a little bit different because while on hyper casual, you're going to be focusing very much on day 0 and day 1. Some partners have actually seen very good day 7 and day 14 retention rates for their hybrid casual games. So they find them a bit easier to monetize over straight up hyper casual, which is why I think we're seeing more of a shift into this hybrid model. So that is a little bit more similar to casual, but you still have that advantage point of quicker turnarounds and so on.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. Moving to the next question. What are some of the main trends that you're seeing currently in advertising? So we've almost at the halfway point of 2022. What are some of the trends that you're seeing, and specifically how those play within the hyper and hybrid space? And Chloe, do you want to start us off?
Yeah, I just want to share something that we've seen from our publishers. So, because of the M&A in this industry, we got a lot of our publishers busy with mediation migration in Q1. So that basically, I don't know if you guys see the same thing, but that basically install our partnership, with our publishers. So we might get a verbal, say Q4 last year, and then they will say, yeah, definitely have time for Q1. But that mediation migration basically just stole the partnership on our side. That's just the number one trend that we're seeing in H1. That's very interesting. And then from Q2 heading into H2, the trend that we're seeing is publishers or studios, they are really open to testing different formats. Compared to last year or 2 years ago, because we thought like last year was going to be the break point, but right now I feel like this year, especially H2, is going to be the break point for different formats, like the in-play, here at MX, audio ads that I definitely hear a lot at different events, which is a good news for us, trying to break into the walled garden, because I think rewarding videos, interstitials, normal banners have dominated the space for too long. So yeah, I think there's going to be more studios testing different formats, and also trying different UA solutions. That's basically what we see on our side.
And that's fantastic news and really good to hear. Christian, do you echo Chloe's feeling? Are you seeing the same trend?
Yeah, so let's just say everyone remembers the IDFA apocalypse. It wasn't really an apocalypse. It's just that, hyper casual and mid-core and hardcore had to pivot how they were going to, reach new users. and kind of appeal to advertisers. And I definitely mimic what Chloe's saying. Game developers are much more willing to test new formats. I mean, if I think this time to last year, our company's doubled in size because of just the amount of publishers that are actually coming to us off the back of an event. When before, the conversion rate was much lower in 2021. Now, yes, that's a case of additional PR and flying around the world towards these different events, but we are seeing an openness to all kinds of formats. And I believe what's really happening here is we're going through that teething process where there's going to be a new kind of monetization advertising stack, which is going to have audio, is going to have in display mixed with the kind of legacy ad formats as well. And I only think this is going to be exacerbated and quickened when Google makes a similar move in terms of its data privacy stance. So yeah, it's all looking good. And I think developers are definitely much more receptible to our predictions, given what's happened over the last 18 months.
Fantastic. Avital, anything to add on top of it?
Just to add to that, it's very interesting regarding the discussion around the surge of publishers coming into the market, which means that game developers are more willing to self-publish. This is what we see more and more, as opposed to the larger players really owning the industry. But we're not necessarily seeing that in such a competitive way in whom they're targeting. We see more self-publishers really shifting towards targeting tier 2 and tier 3 markets, because of course they're mid to smaller size. They're not going to want to compete with the heavier costs in the tier 1 market. So it's much easier to keep the CPIs down and still churn over enough high value users to make the game scalable and profitable within tier 2 and tier 3.
It's very interesting. Some of my past experience in working in those markets is sometimes when a lot of your monetization partners also struggle and to get the demand going. So you kind of like your CPRs are lower, but your revenues are also lower. Are you seeing more also monetization solution focusing on those markets to answer that need, to try to create some sort of a breathing room or a gap between the CPI and the CPI that you're paying and the CPM that you're earning?
Well, the business model needs to shift to adapt, right? So your goals and your overall ROAS targets are going to be significantly lower, but your margins are going to be smaller. So you still see profitability and scalability, but with the understanding that you're looking at a different business model in order to achieve those targets within those sectors.
So lower margins, higher scale.
Yeah.
Fantastic. So you already touched upon the maybe role of or how important casual and hybrid in terms of testing new ads formats. What do you think is the role that those kind of genres facilitate in enabling in-game advertising? Do you think they help they're the gateway of like testing new things and then it moves into other games and other genres? How do you feel about the format? Do we have?
I think this genre is definitely helping the whole industry, the space here. Just the nature of it, there's always so many tests, and then the production time is way shorter. You can publish a new game every week, and it's just the perfect kind of genre for new format to go after, right? So for example, last year, because if you think of the in-play ads, and you just naturally think racing titles or sports titles are perfect because in real life there's already billboards in there. So naturally you think that should be the genres we go after. Yes, we speak to them, but like Christian said, last year conversion rate was slower. So we just had to find a different way, right? So we were like, maybe we should speak to hyper casual studios because they're new. They're a new genre. They are more open to testing different formats. So we started there, like we signed Amanos last year, and then we saw good results, and then they were really open to brainstorming different A/B testing as well, and maybe more formats in certain levels, and maybe more ad frequencies and in this game. And then quickly we shifted to other games, and then that's how we scale up. And then we just saw a lot of like users just saw these formats, and then that basically helped us to scale up. And because there's more and more studios have adopted this format, and then they quickly share their learnings with their friends in the industry. So definitely think this genre is basically new formats lifeline here, and then we can quickly we've got enough DAUs to collect data as well.
Brilliant. So basically, lower barrier as it's a lower risk. You create new formats, you can test on like a limited environment. It is short-lived anyway. If something goes wrong, you know what? It's contained.
Yeah, it's not gonna break anything.
I mean, it's not going to break anything. Maybe long-lasting. So there's going to be the next game. Christian, like I'm assuming you're seeing probably very similar result. However, it is unique. Audio in game is quite new. I'm calling it audio in game. I don't know if anyone else has like kind of adopted my naming of the format. I decided it's audio in game, and that's about it.
I have to give you a credit on the patent now, but no, it is very interesting, right? Because the way that the monetization works for audio, it can work like in the 3D environment, or it could be layered on top of the game. So the scalability is pretty extreme. And when it comes to hyper casual games, the way that some top 20 publishers have been experimenting with us is, we'll go into a test game, and as soon as the results start looking good, they'll immediately want to scale us into 300 games. So it is kind of an opposite. Well, it's a good problem to have when you've got too many publishers looking to scale you, because we've got to remember that we just raised a Series A in November and we're scaling. So when it comes to having a healthy backlog of interested developers to bolster our gaming supply in a sustainable fashion, that is definitely how we see hyper casual. And we are actually concentrating on mid-core games, like with our Social Point game and similar puzzle games. So yeah, it's really a massive compliment to the forecast of how much we can scale this kind of supply in the space, which is great for advertisers, and then we can play one off each other and grow the industry in a sustainable way. And I mentioned sustainable. I'd be lying to say that if we introduced 300 games to the market right now, it would overheat the market. So hyper casual and the flexibility of these studios to scale like in a sustainable fashion, it's a massive compliment to the in-game audio space.
Fantastic. And I'll take any credit you're willing to give me. I'm willing to take it. Well, thank you. Next question. Basically, and that's kind of focusing more on the UA side. So like Avital, I think I'm going to mostly target you. However, if anyone else have anything to add, please do. But what are some of the unique aspects? I think I already asked it. It's mostly because, I've been working in gaming for a while. Working in games, a lot of the feedback I also heard post-IDFA apocalypse was we don't really need to target people. We don't need to, because we are kind of reaching more mass market. Is that the main strategy that you're seeing currently as well? Or is there kind of a shift as hyper and hybrid develop in different ways that they're doing UA from the first, we're just going to target everyone and hope for the best? Are we seeing new trends?
I think we are certainly starting to see new trends emerge. I think this really also sits on the topic, that CPMs are rising. Attribution is still very challenging. It is, of course, ever more important, to focus on having a strategy in order to obtain and leverage first-party data, and that lack of granularity in the data is likely to continue challenging advertisers. I most certainly don't want to give the impression that the future is bleak in that element. It's not, but it is really, the last sort of half of 2021 to first half of 2022 has really been about, how do we overcome this and just have a new way of acquiring users? And I think this generates more of what I coin the fishing net method, which is like, let's just open up the targeting, make it even more broad to try and acquire as many users as possible. And that is also supporting the shift of different ad types, especially, for example, in Facebook testing, because still a majority of the testing does happen on Facebook and leveraging AAA. And some of the challenges that partners talk about would be that, there is a struggle on Facebook to actually show your ads to the right users, and therefore leveraging your different, and I think this is the reason why we're seeing a more willingness and openness to test different ad types, right? But your creative is now almost your targeting to make sure that whoever is seeing that content is actually a user which is going to sustain your retention rates, and also enable you to keep your UA levels up, but actually make sure that you don't see a rapid drop in the value of those users, as well as a lot of partners leveraging even more prediction models. I would say creatives and predictions are probably the biggest topics when it comes to evaluating what's my UA strategy going to be. How can I actually take my data to predict the value of these users? And then in terms of bid shake automation, certainly leveraging those prediction models to be able to make decisions on your bidding strategies across multiple networks that can actually help you to continue to scale.
Super, super interesting. Does that also translate into new channels? As in last year, that's a different question. I'm going to bring it up because I think it's relevant.
Yeah.
We've seen the rise of CPMs on Facebook. We've seen limited, like as you mentioned, measurement has been limited, like ability to measure has been limited, attribution has been hurt by the shift, or we're still trying to overcome this, like how to do attribution in a new reality, in a new technical environment. Are we also seeing an increase or new channels opening up, or people trying basically, you know what, never mind only Facebook, we're going to go somewhere else, somewhere new, green pastures?
I think it's very important to note here that CPMs on any platform at any time are rising. It's not something that is specifically exclusive to Facebook. If you look at the ad revenue index, you can see that it appears that they're likely to continue to rise. One thing I do want to add, which is a benefit to the hyper casual space, it develops obviously or presents more of a challenge on the hybrid space, but because ROAS day 0 and day 1 were already metrics being leveraged, it does mean that those advertisers are less impacted by scan data, as the conversion window is much shorter, and so they're not suffering as much with waiting to find out what this attribution is going to look like. Certainly on hybrid, where partners see stronger retention from day 7 to 14, that is going to pose more of a challenge. And so those data gaps, look very different from your hyper casual to your hybrid. I also think that that presents, especially on that fishing net method and the shift to sort of mid to smaller publishers, self-publishing, again supports the notion of just flying out on tier 2 and tier 3 markets with much smaller margins and almost less risk of losing a lot of your marketing budget to less value users in tier 1, which are way more costly to acquire to begin with.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. And that kind of explains. So we're going back in time in my list of questions. So I am trying to see how to kind of tie it together. But hopefully it will make sense to whoever is listening. I think we're doing pretty well on time. I think we're doing exceptionally well on time. We might have loads of times for you guys all to ask questions in the audience, so feel free to start preparing those. If we're looking at innovation, as we've been speaking, well, Apple has been pushing for innovation. There's a lot of push within the market, as constraint often foster innovation. What are some of the new technologies that we are looking at, either as response to the changes by the platforms themselves, or just, cool things we want to try? Well, games is the place to try cool things, no? So if I'm asking for a question, like, what are some of the new innovation in this space? What are some of the technologies you're seeing emerging, or you believe will emerge in the rest of the year?
There's one thing that we've heard a lot recently is blockchain.
NFT, yeah.
Either studios are already in it, probably on their roadmap for 2022, or they plan to do something next year, or they're looking into it. There's just a lot of conversations happening, and we definitely are heavily involved as well, because we feel like that's going to be the future for gaming, for all the games. Just a different category, genre, no matter how you want to call it. And we still don't know. It's like it's a future. We don't know how it's going to pan out. But definitely a lot of studios are looking into it. And obviously, we're talking about advertising here. How are we going to what do UA to acquire new users? And then, even we have ideas, technology has to, catch up. Same for monetization as well. Are we able to take whatever we have now into blockchain gaming? Because it is different. And yeah, it's just a lot of different topics. I don't know if you see the same thing here.
Yeah, I think this is a very interesting topic. It was actually discussed very recently in a Google panel. They say that blockchain actually has the potential to take gaming to new heights, more so in the second half of 2022. But actually, the end of 2021 saw some of the first hyper casual play to earn crypto gaming platforms starting to emerge.
Mm-hmm.
So I think this is going to definitely redefine ownership, as well as transforming elements like game design and how studios and users are going to spend, invest their money. Challenges here are also going to be around regulation and game quality. So not only, on the UA side of things, but really those kind of first hurdles when it comes to testing, or publishers wanting to test their prototypes in the market, what their strategies are going to be around that. It's definitely a hot and interesting topic, as a complete shift and transition to how we're going to interact with our markets.
Very interesting.
So for me, there's three different areas, and I'll start on the blockchain piece. So the mechanism for playing and earning as you play is great, and lots of studios introduce this mechanism. Now, I'm not going to mention the obviously the names of the studios, but there's attracting players because of the economic mechanism, and then there's attracting studios because of the generally engaging nature of the gaming content.
Mm-hmm.
And a trend that I've been seeing is that phenomenal gaming studios are branching out into Web3 and basically having their own kind of blockchain gaming divisions. And these are gaming studios that have made amazing hyper-casual mid-core games. So we're actually starting to see the merger of really good content with a very engaging economic model. So I'm very, very excited to see what the new heights of retention are going to look like within the Web3 blockchain-based game. And then that maps over into a trend that we're seeing in terms of, I know metaverse is a bit of a buzzword, but basically a 3D game where there is an in-game economy, an element of socializing, and IAP. They're going to be crying for advertising models where you can earn as you potentially listen or view an ad, etc. So we're seeing the rise of people just naturally gravitating towards these kinds of games. They're gravitating towards it in an amazing fashion. So blockchain and metaverse, they're kind of growing together. Something that is a little bit more low key though is, and this is something that all developers should look out for, is, you know, data privacy. I think we're maybe at the first 25 to 30% of how the landscape is going to change. And we've already seen IDFA. Before that, though, remember GDPR, CCPA, COPPA. Multiple states are going to have different privacy chains, and that has to be linked into the monetization stack that you're using. So definitely keep in mind any legacy methodology of monetization, whether it's, you know, monetizing your game, acquiring new users. Think about these mechanisms that are powered by contextual signals rather than you know, personal data. And we're seeing a trend in terms of many startups like ourselves that are raising significant amounts of money because we know that's where the next market gap is. So that's another massive trend that we're seeing. Shout out to number 8.
Well, I have to agree. Yeah, I have to agree with you there. I can't disagree with the role of contextual, but thank you.
I think that I also can't leave this question in terms of tools and innovation with some of the work as well that we're doing with our partners, which is really around creatives, with the increase in demand of churning your creatives. Thanks to TikTok and Gen Z, this is, you know, how are we having enough creatives to actually support the demand in churning them out? What is the best strategy to make sure we keep our conversion rates in our primary campaigns high? Because if you're not changing or refreshing your creatives enough, you're going to see a very rapid decrease in conversion rates in newer networks which are being tested more frequently now outside of Facebook. And so tools around creative automation. This is a lot of the work that we're doing at BidShake with our partners right now, which is really how do we automate our creatives? How do we make sure that we're recognizing very, very quickly when that conversion rate is going down? Because that is also a really important strategy when you're weighing up your marketing budget for the quarter. How are you really making sure that your poorly performing assets are not burning some of those really crucial dollars, which can translate to higher value users if you're able to quickly refresh your creatives and make sure that those assets are keeping campaign performance at peak?
Absolutely. A role of creative is crucial, especially when you're trying to kind of stand out in the crowd and like conversion. I'm going to put you a bit on the spot, Abital. I hope you'll forgive me. But in audio, we've seen it a bit more frequently. Like having WAC, we're working with both advertising or both games and audio companies. So we're kind of having this cross-genre, cross-app type view. We've seen the rise of kind of dynamic audio and personalized audio. So instead of an ad that is static, by dynamic ads, it changes per user. Are you also exploring that within game of like creating not just automation of testing new creatives, but literally personalized creative based on some of the parameters from users?
I think that in that hyper casual space, I don't see that personally as much, just because in this field, to create the amount of creatives that would be needed to make them that personalized, you will end up with churning out 1,000 creatives a week. You know, already on TikTok, when we're seeing advertisers maybe wanting to do like an asset dump of like 100 assets a week so that they have them ready to churn them out even twice a day. But certainly seeing advertisers using much smaller conversion windows, even some partners using like half a day of their creative lifetime value to see if they should churn out and already start to refresh that creative. Yes, but personalizing them in this genre to that degree, I think will be a requirement to completely overwhelm your creative department, who are already probably overwhelmed already.
Absolutely. It's just like if you're extending. So right now it's a trade-off, right? Instead of like changing the creative so fast, you're personalizing them instead, because like one of them can balance the other. But very interesting trends on both sides. And will be interesting to see some maybe cross-testing if we're bringing audio formats into gaming and vice versa and see what happens. But I guess I'm just a bit of a, I don't know.
Yeah, and I still think we can't overlook the importance of playables, and playables don't tend to be as refreshed as often across all of the networks. So playables, if we're focusing in hyper casual and hybrid casual, they still have a very big role to play in ad content. I don't really see so much of a shift away from leveraging some legacy, reliable playables in conjunction and being mixed with the changing of images and videos more frequently.
Do you also see a lot of trends of combining playable with video? That is something I've noticed is more recent, the combination of, like, you literally will have an ad with different steps in it. You go through all of the formats in one ad.
Yeah, and in that respect, it's trying to achieve almost what I said previously, which is if your targeting is going to start to be more broad, because, you know, if you think about legacy targeting and hyper casual, if you look at what it might be in hybrids or certainly with casual, it's very specific user targeting used to be key. So where you lack that granularity in iOS now, broader targeting means your ad content needs to be targeting and speaking to the right users. So I think this is why opening up those different paradigms and having more engaging ads are going to be the key to make sure you're speaking to the right people.
Are you converting the right people? Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So I'm almost at the end of my questions, which is, like I said, 45 minutes. I think I'm pretty good. So key takeaway, one tip. If you had to give their advertisers and publishers one tip to take away from listening to you today, what would be the tip for the rest of 2022? What should they do?
I would say it all comes down to testing different formats. We've spoken a lot about it today. So especially when you market a hyper casual game, data is king, even with the challenges. Being able to focus on predictions, really having your data team analyze that data, because the sooner you can predict how a user will perform, the better you're likely to adapt your UA strategy as a whole. And while testing traditionally was all around Facebook, just opening that up to different networks, expanding your reach, testing different prototypes. This is going to be, I think, a key to overcoming challenges and having a winning strategy.
Yeah, definitely echoing that. Testing different formats, data is very important, and you do need time to collect enough data to analyze. So what we've seen with some studios, they might have less time for a new format, say 2 weeks, but 2 weeks are really too short for that, either on the UA side or monetization. Give it, 8 weeks, because it needs to ramp up, and then you can run different tests, have different test groups, etc., in different games. It might not be working in one title, but it might work in another title. Work closely with the company that you're testing with, because communication is key. The more closely you're working with them, it's more highly likely you're going to see successful results. So that would be my tip.
Fantastic. Christian.
And I guess this tip I'll lead with an example. 2020, great year for gaming companies when it came to brand advertisers. Maybe not so much. I know that AudioMob had to kind of pivot to see the success we did in 2021. I was watching AdMix and the pivots they were doing, which was amazing to see. Remember being on the call with the founder of PayPal, where he was mentioning that if the road ahead is looking more difficult, perilous, if you will, you need to buckle down and diversify where your revenue comes from. It could be pivots, innovations, new products, etc. Now, as a monetization manager that might be watching this, if you look a couple of years down the line, is the prediction that it's going to be harder to get the data and monetize and kind of get access to the users that you want to get to monetize the games, or is it going to be easier? The answer almost always is going to be it's going to be harder because of all the changes in the market. So it's of the utmost importance just to diversify how you're going to get that revenue, how you're going to get those users by testing literally everything. One of the things I did in 2020 is, when we were pivoting our strategy, it was to figure out red growth hacking, and we basically tested things that we didn't even think were going to work just to see if they would, and we were pleasantly surprised. So yeah, the last thing I'll leave you with is test absolutely everything and try and diversify how you're going to generate your revenue.
100%.